Hey, campfire crew, let's get it on. This episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories is brought to you by 3D Comics in Lancaster, New York. If you're a serious comic book collector, just starting out your collection, or maybe you're just a casual reader, then you have to check out 3D Comics in Lancaster, New York. From graded comics, custom art lithographs, limited edition prints and statues, 3D Comics is a must-see for the serious enthusiast, but the laid-back atmosphere is perfect for anyone with a love for comic books and more. They also specialize in custom art Funko Pops, taking regular Funko Pops and having a team of artists do original art on the boxes. Each comes with a certificate of authenticity. Located at 32 Central Ave in the heart of the village of historic Lancaster, New York, 3D Comics is open Wednesday through Saturday, 10 to 6, with special appointments available on Sundays. Find them online at 3dcomicsandmore.com. That's the number 3, the letter D, comicsandmore.com. And if you prefer to shop online, owner Joel Sharmani has tons of items available on eBay. Find a quick link to that on the shop's homepage. They also feature in-store appearances from today's hottest artists, special offers, and every Wednesday is New Comic Book Day. Give them a call at 716-860-7837, visit them online right now at 3dcomicsandmore.com, or better yet, just stop on in. But no matter where you are around the round world, 3D Comics is your destination for the best in comic books, custom art, and beyond. 3D Comics and More. That's the number 3, the letter D, comicsandmore.com. Tell them Uncle Josh sent you. My Ex-Wife, submitted by DeadGuy447. I did something really stupid and got married at 21. I'm sure it works out for some people, but I fell for a bombshell who really only wanted me because I had taken over my family's tree service and plowing business, and I had also started an internet business that was doing well, but was small. I'll call her Carrie. She was a perpetual student, and even after 4 years of marriage and her 7 years of changing majors, I stood by her side because I loved her. We had a beautiful daughter that I would do anything for, and that meant working my ass off to make sure that they were both getting what they needed. At a young age, I bought a new home with new structures to house the business equipment for the lawn and plowing service, and also to get away from paying rent elsewhere and keep everything on my property. Yeah, it was a big investment, but it was also a good business move, and I still have it going this way. Well, my wife insisted on putting my daughter in daycare when she turned 1 for a lot of what she thought were good reasons, but it turned out she just wanted to have a life without us. She had found some other guy at her college, and yes, she was still going to night school in year 8 of that mess of an education, and was boinking this guy behind my back. When I found out, I told her we needed to work things out and go to counseling or something, but she didn't want to. She cried a lot and said she was sorry and that it wouldn't happen again, and like a dunce, I believed her. But then I came home early from a job one day unexpected, and caught her in the act. And that was it. I didn't yell, I didn't threaten the guy, I didn't beat him up, I just calmly put my hand on my Colt. I have a full carry permit because of my business, and I just told them they both needed to leave the house. My wife threw a tantrum, and I just looked her right in the eyes and said, "Get out." She knew I meant it. The guy was scared and ran out right away and left. Carrie started begging me over and over to stay, and I just called her mother and said, "Your daughter's been sleeping with a guy behind my back. I just caught them in our own bed, and I wanted you to know." And then I hung up. Carrie burst into tears, and that's when her phone started ringing. I calmly walked out of the room and sat down on our back deck. My phone rang, and it was my mother-in-law who said that she had told Carrie to come back to their house, and how sorry she was for me, and that things would work out. Carrie left without even seeing me or saying another word. Things did work out. I know guys get the shaft a lot in this sort of thing during a divorce, but my lawyer was good, and the courts ruled in my favor despite Carrie's requests. She got no alimony, and the court ruled she was fit to work. She got no child care because the court ruled I was the more fit person to take care of her and that I would take care of those bills. But Carrie could see her every other weekend until we both decided to change our minds on the custody. Thank God for my parents in more ways than one, because they helped take care of her. My little girl is my world. Carrie's parents also stepped up, and if my little one was being taken care of by them, I said it was okay if Carrie saw her then too, which was a big mistake. After a second visit with my ex-in-laws, Carrie tried to take my baby away when my in-laws were distracted with something. She didn't even have a car seat. I had it. My father-in-law ran out into the driveway to stop her, and I guess she was crying and screaming and scaring my kid. When I found out, I put a stop to those visitations too, and this is really when the crazy stuff started. I had changed everything on the house. All the windows, new locks, but I forgot to change the garage door opener, and Carrie still had a clicker. I completely overlooked that. One night after putting my daughter to bed, I was watching TV in a back room and I heard the door opening. I got up and went to the door, and we had an attached garage to the house where I kept my everyday driver. And the second I opened the door and flicked the light on, the door went back down. I didn't hear a car pulling away, so I chalked it up to a glitch like the freaking putz that I can be. I just went back to my scotch and TV. The next day when I came home after work with my baby in my arms from my parents, I went into a destroyed living room with the words, "You did this," spray painted on a wall with my ex and mine's wedding photos I never took down. I immediately called my parents. I called the cops, and the cops went out to talk to my ex. She denied everything, and I mentioned the garage clicker, and she said she didn't have it anymore. I was so pissed. She was basically going into my house and getting away with it. I got a new garage door opener the next day. A couple of weeks later, I had to work late in my garage gearing up for the plowing season with my best worker, Jake. My baby was going to spend the night at my parents' house. When Jake left, I went inside, and I got a call from a woman I had known before Carrie, and we talked. I noticed a shape at the window of the back room and went over to see what it was. There was nothing in the backyard, so again I chalked it up to my eyes playing tricks. Another bad decision, because I went to sleep, and when I woke up, there was a note on my chest that said, "Don't sleep too soundly. You might not wake up." I again called the police, but they couldn't find any way of a break-in. They questioned my ex, but she had an alibi from some new guy she was shacking up with. Not long after this came the harassing phone calls from this guy. This idiot was too dumb to not use his own name. He would call and say all this yang about me being a bad father and that he would kick my butt, yada yada yada. I called him back and told him to knock it off, but only on voicemail as he never answered. More stuff happened in the house when I was away at work. Little things like sand in my sugar bowl, toilets stopped up with paper, just really stupid things like that. I knew it was either her or that guy, but couldn't figure out how they were getting in. I changed the locks again, but the day I did was the scariest night. It was winter now, and I was beat from a day of plowing and getting my crew out to the right places and dealing with the books and things. Jake was on a call, and I just wanted a shower and a beer. When I went out into my bedroom, I was jumped by two guys who put a pillowcase over my head and just started wailing on me. I was getting my ass wickedly beat. My baby was at my in-laws, thank God, and I fought them back. I mean, I'm not a wimp, but after a while, I swear I heard my ex say, "That's enough for now," but she later denied ever being there when I called the cops. They all ran out of the house, and while I was getting my wits and calling the cops, I never saw or heard a vehicle taking off, and I couldn't say who had done what, but now I was royally pissed. Anybody who knows anything about Bostonians, we get wicked pissed. The final straw came a week later. My mom had been home with my baby, and I got home really late after another day of plowing. She said she was too tired to drive and was going to sleep in our guest room, and I agreed. Sometime around 3, I heard a commotion, though, and I woke up to a hand in my throat, my baby crying through her monitor, and what sounded like my ex trying to soothe my little girl. I tried to get up, but the grip on my throat got tighter. I then did what I should have done all along. I frantically reached for the side of my bed where I kept my Colt and brought it up. For some reason, and I'll get the business for this, the safety was not on, and I fired a shot. The guy, this new boyfriend of my ex, let go of me and stepped back. I popped up, held him at gunpoint while I heard my baby screaming, my ex yelling, and seconds later blue lights flashing in my driveway. My mom obviously heard things happening and called the cops. Long story short, this guy was arrested and convicted for B&E, assault and battery, criminal intent, menacing, and some other things. He only got 3 years. My ex, she got B&E, endangering the welfare of a child, menacing, criminal intent, attempted kidnapping, and some other things. She fought and won the last charge, claiming mental instability for not seeing our baby, and I was more than angry that got dropped. She still did get a stiff sentence, though. I mean, what a sad thing to have to do to a little girl. The first few years of her life with a bad mom in jail. She got 5 years for it, even though I fought to make it a felony for all the other things, but they couldn't prove that she had done any of it. This was 8 years ago. My ex is out, and while my daughter does see her under my supervision, she doesn't really want to have anything to do with her. My in-laws are still in our life, and I would never take that away from her. When I take my daughter to see Carrie, I don't say one word despite her apologies. I just watch my daughter from afar, sit and barely speak to her until it's time to go. As for the guy, I heard he beat Cheeks out of town the minute he got out of jail and moved away. Good move, loser. Don't come back. I wish I could say the same to my ex. The Crazy Man, submitted by Zawadi. Forgive my English, it's only so good. I like your stories and I need to share. Please do change if I mess up. I speak it very well, but writing is harder. When I was little, I went to academy in a place maybe 200 kilometers from Nairobi. I'm not saying the name because people might be embarrassed. As you guess, schools are a lot different in Africa than in most places, even big cities like what you know. Our buildings are open and airy, and not too far away are national parks for people to see animals not in zoos. We have lots like cheetahs and zebras and elephants. I live in the UK now, but even when I go home, I remember fondly the greenness in animals. We had stores and churches and so on, but we also had contact with people not from our area. I have to share something bad. It's a thing called jiggers. They're not good. It's like a bug or a flea that gets under the skin when people live in poor areas. They lay eggs under the skin and move quick to other body parts. The way to get them out is scraping them and cutting so they leave. What happened at Academy this one time was a man from outside our town came to school with jiggers on his feet and legs, and he was drunk. He wanted help and came to my room first, and I can't forget he had a big knife and said, "Masada, Masada," again, and repeat. It means help in English. Teacher saw this was bad and told us in English to sit in our chairs and it would be okay. She then told the man, "Can I get you help?" She went to him and he put the knife in the air and kept speaking, "Masada, Masada." My friend Liam was at the door, and the man grabbed him and held the scary knife to his head. Teacher said to stop and relax and she could help. We all looked at him and saw him slouch, and teacher then told a friend to go find a nurse. But she said it in Swahili, and the man said no people, just drugs. He wanted something for his feet. Teacher said, "I can't help if I can't get help," and the man took the knife and cut a little on Liam's arm. Not bad, but blood was there. Teacher then took her hand computer tablet and sent a message for help. We were all still sitting down, and it was really quiet. We could hear our other friends playing outside. We were all scared. In a little bit, a man came, and he was an older teacher, and stood in the door and asked what the man wanted. The man shook the room, yelling about his feet. He didn't have any shoes, you know, and he pushed the knife to my friend's ear. The teacher said to slow down. He'd be back, and to not hurt any more children. He knew we were all scared. The man was breathing like a dog and scratching one foot on the other foot. I don't know too many people who've had jiggers, but I hear they're very itchy and painful. Soon the other man came with more men, and before the man could do much, they put him to the floor and beat him. We all screamed, and they dragged the man out by his legs. We ran to the windows to look, and the man was very angry. He did get help right there, though. A doctor came, washed his feet, and began to cut out the jiggers while the other men held him down. The man got in trouble for his stuff, but I saw him a few years later, and he looked different and clean. I'm glad Academy could help, but he did not need to scare us like that. If you want to see jiggers, there's YouTube movies. Thank you, Uncle. Love from your friend from Africa in England. Uncle Josh note here. Thanks for your submission, and I guarantee you speak and write English a lot better than a lot of people I know. Taken Hostage at Work by Rogue Misanthrope. I worked at a boxing/MMA gym almost 20 years back, basically as a receptionist. We were deep in the ghetto. I almost didn't take the job because of the neighborhood's reputation, but the friend who recommended the place said it was the most fulfilling office work I'd ever find. So I gave it a try, and he was right. Before working there, I thought I'd grown up lower middle class and that I'd become pretty broke at that point in my life. Compared to the quality of life in our community, I was Bill Gates. The school-to-prison pipeline was the standard around there, and we accepted it was bigger than all of us, so we were just trying to divert as many kids away from it as we could. As a result, our biggest program was a teen MMA class that met every night except Sundays to keep our kids off the streets. We had one kid from that program who was a total wild card. Cisco had been coming since he was 4 years old and in our after-school fitness program, and he rose right through the ranks to actually become one of our trainers and even a semi-pro fighter. But as professional and disciplined as he was inside the gym, he could be as wild and unhinged outside. There was just too much going on at home, and at the time of this incident, he had just turned 16. We had one fitness instructor, Chandra, who knew everything there was to know about physiology, nutrition, and all things exercise, but was as dumb as a brick when it came to common sense. She was always getting roped into MLM-type stuff back when they were still called pyramid schemes. We poached her from a fancy franchise gym on the other side of town, and the owner found out she'd grown up around here and guilt-tripped her into coming home. Whenever we had rich-looking prospective clients, we always sent her to pitch them instead of our usual outreach people. Finally, there was Alsace. Alsace was the golden child of our Beat the Streets program. Growing up in one of the roughest parts of town, one sibling murdered and 2 in prison, but she was still in school getting straight A's and applying to colleges for that next year. She came in every day when we opened and stayed every night until we closed. She never spoke a word and couldn't make eye contact with anyone she hadn't already known for years. But it was fine. We just let her work in the office. I'm only telling you all this so you can understand why everyone reacted the way they did when the day came. I was just settling in for a lunch break. It was the middle of the day on a Sunday. The neighborhood was super Christian, so we weren't officially open on Sundays. We kept the facilities running, but we didn't have classes or anything. We just unlocked the place in case anyone wanted to come by or needed a place to go. Cisco was there, which was a relief because if he wasn't, he was usually somewhere he shouldn't be. And Chandra had just had a personal training client in the gym who'd left, so she was getting ready to leave too. Alsace was repainting our bathroom that really didn't need repainting to make some extra money she really did need. Cisco didn't have a reason to be there other than to not be somewhere else, but we always tried to give the kids a sense of purpose, so he was our door guy that day. Usually, we really do always have someone watching the door because sometimes randos walked in, mostly pickpockets or homeless people looking for money, skeevy guys casing the place out. Whatever. Every business on the block had someone posted by the door to turn them around at the threshold and make sure the place had a reputation as vigilantly watched, so not worth the efforts or hassle. Most of us hated guarding the door, but the young guys loved it because it made them feel tough in a way that was productive. So we had Cisco posted up. He wasn't really paying attention, but it was a Sunday afternoon. No reason he should actually need to. He was crumpling up pieces of paper and trying to hit Chandra in the head with them, in a playful way, while she was doing some exercises. I was eating my lunch filing invoices. Couldn't have been a more average afternoon at that point. Then the door chimed. We had a convenience store-style buzzer on it, so whoever was in charge could be on notice if someone new entered. A guy shuffled in who looked average at first glance, but I could feel his energy was off. I usually greeted new clients from behind the desk, but without even thinking, I stood up right away and asked, "Can I help you?" in a sharp tone and taking a step out from behind the desk. My spine was tingling. The man looked me up and down, eyes flashing a little. He had kind of a limp, but it was his only distinct feature. Other than that, he was just wearing a normal t-shirt and jeans, and I kept looking at him hard to try and figure out what it was about him that made me so uncomfortable. He didn't say anything at first, so I repeated it again, a little louder and more firmly. "Yo, can I help you with something?" And he just stood there, kind of staring past me. Cisco finally tuned in and stood up, drawing his shoulders back and telling the guy, "All right, man, look, we're closed," and gesturing out the door. I knew he must have sensed something too, because even on his worst days, he was usually friendly when public-facing unless given an overt reason not to be. The guy's face got all twisted up and he asked, "Where's Paolo?" "Fuck if I know," I told him. "We don't have a Paolo. You've got the wrong place." But he wasn't buying it. He clenched his fist and started breathing kind of heavy. "I want to talk to Paolo." It kind of clicked for Cisco at that point because he'd been there longer than me, so he realized, "Oh, look, man, Paolo hasn't worked here in like 5 years. We can't help you." But the guy still didn't seem to process it. I wasn't here that far back, so I didn't know what they were talking about. He looked at Cisco dead in the eye and screamed, "Don't fuck with me! Paolo knows what I'm owed, and I'm not leaving till I get it, so what's up?" Chandra must have heard that through her headphones because she stopped her cooldown and came over from across the room to see what was going on. Cisco didn't take too kindly to the shouting, and would never admit this, but was definitely rattled by any unexpected loud noises or yelling. I think it had something to do with his family life. Anyway, he was pissed from being screamed at and immediately went to physically escort this guy out. He wasn't the best at de-escalation off the cuff, but I also can't entirely blame him, because often just throwing these guys' asses on the curb and locking the door was the most efficient way to deal with them. I couldn't put it out of my head that something about the situation was off, though. We bounced 2 or 3 people a week, and I'd never gotten a full-body visceral reaction like this one. I mean, my mind was trying to tell me something. This guy had some nervous tics, like he kept kind of resting his hand on his hip a lot, but I thought it was just because his pants were baggy, like a lot of guys around here. You may be wondering why I, the adult, was letting the teenage kid do our bouncing for us. The answer's simple. I don't know anything about fighting. I was there working doing the administrative stuff. I'd never thrown a punch in my life. So Cisco approached the guy going, "Where the fuck do you think you are right now? You better check yourself next time you come through those doors. We are closed." And he went to physically throw him out. But that's when I saw it. The guy was grabbing for a bulge. Has a limp, touching his hip a lot, distinct bulge on the same side. They trained us for these signs. This guy was armed. "Cisco, step back. Step back." I tried to warn him, but it was too late. He wasn't listening to me because he phased everything else out when he felt disrespected. I'd seen him do it in the ring 100 times. I heard stories of it getting him into trouble outside 100 times. But now was he about to get us all killed? I mean, even in the ring, he never won the fights when he did that. "Think what? Think what? Think what?" the guy asked as he pulled the gun out and started waving it around. Nobody leaves until Paolo pays up." He announced it almost laughing as he said it. Thankfully, whether it was instinct, common sense, or a miraculous combination of the two, Cisco put his hands up and stepped back. I was more worried about what Cisco would or wouldn't do than I was about what the guy with the gun would or wouldn't do. We almost lost Cisco when he tried to bring a knife to a gunfight just earlier that year. This guy here was clearly unstable, not trying to prove he was the biggest, toughest guy on the street. But I don't know if Cisco was mature enough to differentiate between movie-style bad guys and reality-style mentally ill crackheads. Chandra wasn't even approaching cool or collected. I wasn't worried about her trying a hero play, but what she did instead wasn't a whole lot better. She saw the gun and fucking lost her mind. She started screaming at the top of her lungs, just screaming, flipping out, literally just, "Ah! Ah! Ah!" Of course, I did nothing. I mean, nothing. I didn't put my hands up, didn't step back, didn't go help the kid, didn't tell Chandra to shut up, nothing. I was frozen with shock. To make matters worse, her yelling was stressing the guy out. Cisco saw that and very evenly and calmly started saying, "Chandra? Chandra, hey, excuse me, Chandra. No, not helping. Breathe. I need you to breathe, hun." But there was a plus side to Chandra's screams. It got Alsace's attention from back in the bathroom. I caught her ever so gently shutting the door from the corner of my eye. Thankfully, this guy didn't notice. I was trying to think of something to say or do. I'm embarrassed to admit it even now, but honestly, I was trying to remember hostage scenes from movies. I mean, I was drawing a complete blank. All I could think about was how I'd always wanted to take my dad to a Broncos Super Bowl, and that I might die before I got the chance. For some reason, that clouded all my thinking about how to potentially not die and kept me from assessing reality. Even now, it's my clearest memory of this ordeal. At least I knew exactly what not to do. It wasn't because of any special expertise or presence of mind. Raw survival instinct just kicked in. If I felt myself going to do or say something that could set this gunman off, my body physically overrode my mind and wouldn't allow me to. I was paralyzed with fear, but a healthy fear. Cisco and his fucking man bun, realizing how totally ineffectual I was being, stepped up to the plate again. He spoke so slowly and calmly from the start, but, like I said, Cisco was a wild card. I was petrified to have him running this, not knowing if he'd be sweet-talking one minute and then lunging for the gun, or saying something to antagonize the guy another minute. The fear and uncertainty just made it even harder for me to take the lead. And on top of that, Chandra looked like she might faint at any second. "You want to talk to Paulo? All right, let me go get him, okay?" Cisco offered. The guy thought about it for a second and agreed. "All right, I'm going to go and call him for you, okay?" Cisco asked him, and then not moving a muscle before the guy with the gun said it was acceptable. "No phones, no, the guy started muttering, and I realized that with it being Sunday, it could realistically be 24 hours before anyone came into the building or started actionably wondering where any of us were. I was really dismayed at that additional layer of chaos. I think Cisco had planned to call someone rather than Paulo because I could see the disappointment on his face. "Hey man," he asked, really evenly and soothingly. "How can I get in touch with Paulo for you if you won't let me call him?" "Shut up, I'm thinking!" the guy shouted, kicking over a display stand in a burst of rage. This started Chandra crying. "Shut up, shut up, shut up, shut up!" He started pacing back and forth. Cisco visibly flinched at the screaming, but soldiered forward. "Hey, I'm Cisco," he said really calmly. "Do you have something I can call you?" The guy paused for a second, obviously considering his answer. "Just call me Troy, but don't talk to me. Where's Paulo?" He just told Cisco not to talk to him and asked him a direct question. That was too much, even for him. That survival instinct forced me to start forming some sentences. My voice cracked and was barely audible, but it was coherent enough. "So, Troy, was it? Paulo, sounds like he doesn't work here. But what do you need from him? Maybe I can help instead." I asked him that, telling myself over and over in my head to just treat him like any other disgruntled client and rely on that script. That was muscle memory at this point. I could literally recite it with a gun to my head. "Paulo knows what he owes me," Troy said, and I had no clue how to respond to that, but hey, at least he wasn't shouting anymore. Cisco asked him, "Can you tell us what Paulo knows he owes you?" The guy responded, No. I want to deal with him directly. Where is he?" Cisco told him again that we could help him if he just explained what he wanted, and it continued like that in a circle for 30 or 40 more minutes, with some long silences in between where Troy both cried and tried to punch through a wall, unsuccessfully. Then the phone rang. He didn't like that. "What is that?" he asked, as though we had made it ring. It's the phone," I explained, each word taking my breath away. "Make it stop," he said. By this point, he'd become comfortable enough with Cisco that he was letting him move around a little. They were chatting about baseball in some neighborhood convenience store, and he'd actually remained pretty level-headed as long as Chandra stopped asking him to just let her go or audibly sobbing. So Cisco went over, picked up the phone, and hung it back up. Within seconds, it was ringing again. "Make it stop!" Troy bellowed, kicking at another stand. This one was weighted down with concrete, so he hurt his foot, which just made him angrier. He started waving the gun around again and chattering some incoherent stuff, rather than holding it at his side like he had been. Needless to say, we were all very anxious to shut that phone off. We assumed it was just some ornery parent calling to complain about their child's tuition charge coming through. We couldn't have guessed who it actually was. So, Cisco picked it up again and hissed, "Stop calling! We're closed! Stop calling!" Then he slammed the receiver down. It immediately rang a third time. Troy pointed the gun in my general direction and put his finger on the trigger, screaming something with, "I said cut it off!" Cisco ripped the phone cord out of the wall. It stopped! You don't have to do anything, okay? You don't have to do anything!" He was more frantic than he'd been throughout the whole ordeal, and his eyes were locked on the barrel of that gun. The whole sequence of having a gun pointed at me, only to be saved by a teenager's drastic action, felt as though I was watching it happen to someone else more than something that was happening to me. It does even still, looking back. For whatever reason, Chandra thought the heels of this phone saga was the appropriate moment to try, for the third or fourth time, to talk her way out of the situation. That got him to move the gun away from me, at least, but it didn't help matters overall, either. She kept chattering so quickly that you'd think she were a tape on fast forward. So this really isn't working, right? So you should probably just let all of us go, or maybe just leave one of us here, right? Because it's really the same effect. Or just leave. I mean, no one will know you were ever here, and you can go look for Paolo, and everything will be fine. Because this isn't working, and you should probably just let us go. Then we can all leave and move on. And I have a daughter, and oh my God, I love her so much. If you have kids, you understand, right? I have to get out of here. I have to leave. I have to get out of here right now. I'm sorry, I just do. Please let me leave. You don't need me for this. Eventually, he started getting agitated, and Cisco had to shout over her to shut her up until she was hyperventilating in silence again. Troy hadn't tied us up or even forced us to lie down or anything. So Chandra was still just sitting at the edge of the mats, and I was still beside the desk. Like I said, he actually let Cisco move around in some, if he wasn't sudden about it. Cisco's overall goal was to keep the guy calm, but every so often he kept trying to bring the conversation back to what this guy wanted from Paolo, so we could start working on convincing him to let us go. The most specific he got was variations of, "If Paolo gives it up, we'll all be fine. It'll be fine. But it's time for me to be a man right now because I'm done waiting." If we pressed him on exactly what he wanted, it would only trigger a rage because he'd interpret it as us questioning whether or not he should have it. Along the lines of, "I want what I'm owed. Don't try to act like I don't have this fucking coming. You know he's been holding out on me." We tried to get it across that it was in his best interest to be specific in his demands because if it was money, we'd pay him. If it was drugs, Cisco probably had a hookup. If it was about a woman, Chandra would replace her. If it was something else, we'd figure out something else. Whatever it was, we were hoping once we knew, we could start appealing to the molecule of rationale that was buried behind his decision-making to begin negotiating a release. Trying to figure it out just made it worse, because he was frustrated that we didn't already know. I had a sneaking suspicion that with the stress, pressure, and sudden burst of new information, he wasn't even sure anymore, and that's what was frustrating him. I tried to help where I could, but it was really all I could do to not curl up on the ground and hyperventilate along with Chandra. Worse, it turned out that was what Chandra did when she was relatively composed. Eventually, she spontaneously cracked under the pressure. She decided to see what would happen if she just tried to get up and sprint out. She very nearly got shot. 3 things prevented her from being shot, though. First of all, when Troy pointed the weapon at her, she sat her ass back down on the ground where she stood. Second, Cisco instantly put himself between her and Troy when he realized the colossal mistake she was making. And third, "Freeze! Police! Everybody down! Get down! Get down! Get down!" Those 3 calls earlier were not a complaining parent or telemarketer. It was the cops trying to make contact. When they couldn't, they knew so little about the situation that they eventually just decided to get in. To my knowledge, Cisco didn't have any official record whatsoever, but I will say he knew exactly what would happen when the police came in. The rest of us didn't. He laid down exactly how they wanted him to. Was a step ahead of all their directions. Maybe the only lighthearted part of this for me was holding that over his head after the dust settled. They cuffed all of us at first until they could determine who was perpetrating a crime and who was a victim of one. They subdued Troy with nothing more than pepper spray. He dropped the gun when ordered, but was still pretty worked up and resistant to being taken into custody. Oh, LPT, if you think someone is going to be pepper sprayed, get the fuck away from them. That shit travels all through the air, even if it's not directed anywhere near your face. And I was handcuffed when they sprayed him, so I couldn't even cover my eyes with my shirt or anything. But anyways, one of their tactical-looking guys was helping us get uncuffed as they realized Troy was the only criminal, and said, Hold it, I only count 3. Where's the 4th? The caller reported a minimum of 4 victims, right? I was stupid enough to just say in my peppery post-hostage phase, there was another girl. They heard was and immediately went to the worst-case scenario. They deduced who the bad guy was at this point, so we're cross-checking their notes and getting in Troy's face going, Where is she? Damn it, what did you do to her? You tell us right now or God help me! And that's when I composed myself enough to point towards the bathroom as it all came snapping back to me. Because Troy couldn't help them. He didn't even know what they were talking about. The police kicked the door down, and there was Alsace, huddled in a corner, just hysterical. It took everything she'd had to stay silent through the whole thing. not knowing if everyone was okay or what was going on. Alsace saved us. She'd painted 911 on the window of the bathroom, and that's why the cops came. One of our owners spotted the 911 right away when he pulled up, and he lived almost directly across the street. He called the police, giving them all the pertinent information about who was likely to be there that day. The neighborhood had so much crime, more sinister, targeted, and tragic, that this ordeal didn't even get a whole lot of attention. Later that night, 3 kids younger than Cisco were shot nearby in some gang thing, and the 1 or 2 people who wanted to report on what happened over here dropped our story to cover that instead. But one of the responding police officers was so touched by Alsace's quick thinking that he got his department to team up with his brother's small business to give her a pretty healthy college scholarship within the context of the neighborhood's socioeconomic means, and he commended her for her bravery. It was the final straw for Chandra, though. She went back to teaching on the other side of town within a couple of weeks of this happening. Out of courtesy, she'd still do a few personal training sessions here and there, but even that stopped after a while longer. I don't blame her whatsoever. I don't think anyone who was here for it does. Troy never clearly articulated exactly what he wanted from Paolo. We were never even able to track Paolo down to ask if he knew what he owed Troy or could lend any context. No one at work really talked about it much besides that. I mean, it was all anyone talked about for like 2 days, but then everyone just moved on with their lives. I don't know how they did, because it was the single most petrifying thing I've ever experienced. Cisco was even able to look back and laugh about it just a couple of weeks later. But even though it's been years now, I still can't laugh about it. Not too long after this, I had to move, so I left the job. I miss the kids, but I don't miss the reality they were facing that day. So Troy, let's never meet again. Guy in the Shed, submitted by Bruce Shoebottom Society. When I was growing up, I lived in an old farmhouse with a big barn and a ton of property. We didn't actually farm, but my dad wanted the land to hunt, and he was sick of living in the city. I was 12, my sister was 8 when my dad decided to tear down the barn. It was old, and he was worried that it would fall over on its own, and he didn't want us messing around in it because we could have gotten hurt. He had a company come out, and they salvaged a lot of the wood, and my dad kept some for projects around the house. He built a big new shed, and we had our own lawn tractor and stuff like that in there. One night, my parents went out to dinner with some friends, and me and my sister stayed at home eating TV dinners and watching those old but bad awesome shows like Hee Haw, The Love Boat, Fantasy Island. I'll call my sister Sally. We ate dinner and then settled in for some TV when my parents left. They were cool on Saturday nights and let us stay up late if we had been good. Around 9:30, I told Sally I was going to the kitchen to make some popcorn, and I got out the air popper, made the popcorn, and then had to go to the bathroom. When I went back to the kitchen, the bowl was gone. I thought Sally must have come out and grabbed it and didn't think anything else and went back to the living room. When I got there, she said, "Hey, where's the popcorn?" I said, "I thought you took it." She said I was crazy, and I went back to the kitchen, but the popcorn was gone. We couldn't figure out what happened and started talking about ghosts. Then I said maybe I had a brain fart and never even made it. I kind of knew that wasn't the truth, but I just made some more and just left everything else in the back of my head. But then I realized the bowl was missing, and it didn't turn up in any cupboard I looked in. A couple of days later, my mom asked about a bunch of things that were missing out of the pantry and fridge. She was a stickler on following our supper plan, and when she realized certain things were gone, she would blow her top. It was always staples like tuna fish or peanut butter, bread, things like that. A few weeks later, I woke up in the middle of the night from a bad dream. When my eyes adjusted to the dark, I saw a dark shape standing in my bedroom door. I stared at it for a while, but it just closed my door, and then I fell back asleep, and I wrote it off as a bad dream. But the next morning, my parents got up before me and my sister and found muddy footprints in the hallway, going down the stairs, through the downstairs, and out the back door. They'd also come in the same way. Of course, we got yelled at, and when I told them about what I saw, they said it was just a dream. One day I went out to the shed because it was time to cut the grass, and the first thing I noticed was the lock was not on the door securely. And that was strange, because as much as my mom was a stickler about food, my dad was the same way about his tools and things out in the shed. I opened the door, and whew, I got a bad bunch of air. It smelled terrible, and I found out why when I went in. In the back of the shed, and remember, this wasn't just a shed like for rakes and a lawnmower. This was a pretty large building with a garage door at the back. You could put 2 cars in there easy. But anyway, in the back of the shed was a 5-gallon bucket that had poop and pee in it, and there were all the cans and stuff from the things that were missing from our pantry and kitchen, all stuffed in a plastic bag. There were also some clothes stuffed in a bag, and I just ran back to the house to tell my dad. He stopped whatever it was that he was doing, and we both went back out there. And the look on his face was not a good one, and he went to call the sheriff. They came out and made a report. It was pretty obvious that someone had been camping out in our shed and somehow getting into our house for a couple of weeks right under our noses. The sheriff told us to make an inventory of everything to see if anything was missing, but nothing other than the food was. No cash, no jewelry, no tools, no nothing. Just the stuff that had been missing from the fridge and the pantry. It was then that I remembered the night I saw that figure in my doorway, and I brought it up again. Now my parents believed me, and said they felt bad that they didn't at first. We bought new locks for all of the doors and the shed, and nothing else ever happened. But how creepy is that? Someone just coming and going into our house, even when we were home, and we never even noticed. Crazy Drug Addict, submitted by Lucas Oilfielder. When I was 19, I was home from college on winter break. This happened to me. My parents both work, and my brother was already married and living a few streets away, and that's kind of important to know. You can see how I was taken off guard. Our neighborhood was great, one of those nice everybody-knows-everybody places, and we rarely locked the doors. My friends came right in without knocking, and I did the same at their houses. It's just the way it was. I'd gotten a PlayStation for Christmas, and one morning my mom and dad left for work, and I was up early for whatever reason. Most of the time I slept until noon back then. To be young and free again. That morning I can remember everything like it was yesterday. I got up, showered, made some eggs, smoked a fatty, and was going to settle down with some Madden before going to play hockey with the boys later that day. Back then, everyone in my family smoked. Stupid, I know. None of us do now, but back then we all did. And I was a good athlete. Anytime someone said I should quit, I told them, hey, if Mario Lemieux can smoke, then I can too. I sat down in the living room that had the biggest TV in the house, lit a Winston, and got my game on. About an hour later, I noticed it was colder in the room. I got up and checked the thermostat, and it was fine, but it was just cold. That's when I noticed the front door was open. I thought, that's odd. Maybe it just blew open. I shut it, got a beer, and went back to my game. You know that feeling you get when you are certain someone else is in the room with you? I got that. I'd been on a beanbag chair looking at our awful new model flat-screen TV, the kind that had more case than screen, and I was so immersed I wasn't paying attention to my surroundings. Then I felt a finger on my shoulder, and I said, "Cut the shit, Steve," thinking it was my brother who came over. I paused the game and turned around. On all fours behind me was this woman. She looked totally out of her mind with a blank stare and a creepy grin. Her clothes were all ripped up, and her scent wafted over to me. It was a combination of body odor, sweat, bad breath, stinky clothes. It made me gag. When I tried to breathe in, it was like trying to suck a car into my lungs. We just looked at each other for what felt like 5 minutes, and then she said, "I'll blow you for $20 or any drugs you've got in the house." This started a whole, "Who are you? Are you crazy? Where'd you come from?" conversation, and she didn't answer anything that I asked. She just kept offering me sexual favors. I was thinking, how do I knock this woman out and then call the police? When I looked over, I saw that she had one of those butterfly knives in her hand. She noticed that I noticed that, and she made this coughing laugh that scared the shit out of me. Thinking maybe she'd take my pot stash and leave, I said, "I've got some pretty good tripweed," but she made the laugh again and shook her head. That's not what she was looking for. I weighed my chances. Could I get up, smack her one, and then get to a phone? She sensed what I was thinking and said, "You can fuck me if you want, tie me up, do whatever." But at the same time, she held up the butterfly knife. Now I was panicking. I slowly got up, and I said, "I'll see what I can find." But she got up too with the knife and jabbed it into my side. "What are you looking for, honey?" she asked with that creepy grin. I took a deep breath and remembered something. My mom suffered really, really bad migraines, and she had something called chlorpromazine to treat it. After researching it now, it's basically Thorazine. Looking at her, I said, "I've got something you'll love, and maybe we can fool around after." I'm paraphrasing at this point, but it was something along those lines. She followed me upstairs to my parents' bedroom and bathroom, and when I went to the sink cabinet, I could see her taking her clothes off behind me in the mirror. This woman was totally shot, but shaking from abstinence. She had all these bruises and sores on her, and the smell just made me want to puke. I got some pills and a Dixie cup of water as she was trying to lay on her back on my parents' bed. I told her my mom usually takes one, and she asked what it was, but before I could tell her, she took the last 3 pills and downed them. She laid back down and within 5 minutes was sound asleep. I stopped myself from punching her in the face while she was out, and then I thought about dragging her out into the cold and leaving her there to freeze. But all I did was take the butterfly knife out of her hand and called the police. They came out, got my full story, and called for medical and took her away. The police stuck around for a bit, and I said I had to call my parents. They had everything they needed and were going to follow up. I called my mom and dad and let them know that I was okay but what had just happened, and that's why the police were there if any of the neighbors said anything. I thought it was over. 2 days before I was supposed to go back to school, I was talking to my girlfriend on the phone in my bedroom. I had been sleeping in our sunroom because I liked it down there on the first floor. Right before I was about to hang up on my girlfriend, I looked over to the windows facing our driveway side, and there was the same woman, standing in the dark with her face pressed up against the glass. I yelled out, "Get the hell out of here!" And through the glass she just said, "I never gave you your blowjob," and she staggered down our driveway into the night. I hung up with my girlfriend, called the cops, and they picked her up a few blocks away, sans a shirt or jacket in the middle of winter. I guess she eventually was sent to a medical facility to detox, and that's the last I saw of her. Hey gang, thanks for listening to this episode of Uncle Josh's True Scary Stories. If you have a true scary story of any nature that you would like to hear narrated on my channel, email unclejoshtruescarystories@gmail.com. I read them all. Please like, share, and subscribe to this channel, and if you'd like to take it a step further, you can support the channel by visiting my Patreon page. A link to that is in the description below, along with all of my links to social media. Thanks for hanging in there as my posts have been a little bit sporadic lately. I'm hoping to do a live campfire this week, but man, things have been a little bit crazy in my life the last week and a half or so I appreciate everybody hanging in there and waiting for the new updates to come through. Another reminder for everyone out there that has a scary Halloween story, the cool ones that I've gotten in so far are just that, really cool, and they're pretty creepy. I'm going to be happy to be putting together the next volume of true scary Halloween stories coming up before this next Halloween. Everybody, be excellent to each other. Wear your mask, social distance, stay safe. Much more to come here, but until next time, remember, be wary of things that go bump in the night. It could be anything. A ghost, a monster, or the guy next door.